President Meehan and Chancellor Motley, I have the honor to present to you Gerald Chan to receive the degree of Doctor of Science, honoris causa.
Gerald Chan, Gerald Chan, Gerald Chan. Known for your innovative work in biotechnology, your business acumen, and your philanthropy, your funding of innovative medical treatments has had an impact on people across the globe. When a Harvard University professor steered your scientific pursuits toward biology, it was a pivotal point that eventually led to a doctorate in radiobiology from the Harvard School of Public Health. After postdoctoral training in pathology at the Harvard Medical School and Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, you began a career in investments. You began that career in investments and you co-founded Morningside, a private investment group which invested in China when the country first opened up, then invested early in internet companies. A decade later, you returned to life in science and biotechnology, focusing on investments that would take universities' novel research findings and develop them into approved patient therapies. In oncology, you led investments in the pioneering use of oncologic viruses, cancer vaccines, and next-generation chemotherapeutic agents and biologies to treat cancers. You've also invested in novel antibiotics, affordable prophylactic vaccines, and antiviral drugs to treat infectious diseases and new treatments for Alzheimer's disease and traumatic brain injury and autism, and in drugs to treat autoimmune diseases and on and on and on, and other rare diseases and degenerative diseases of the eye. You are a distinguished visiting fellow at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, named in honor of your father, where you also serve on the Dean's Board of Advisors. In addition, you are a member of the Global Advisory Council of the International Society for Stem Cell Research, that all may know your passion for biomedical research, as well as your philanthropic spirit. The University of Massachusetts, Boston is honored to confer upon you, Gerald Chan, the degree of Doctor of Science, honoris causa.
Gerald Chan, by the authority vested in me by the Board of Trustees of the University of Massachusetts, I confer upon you the degree of Doctor of Science, honoris causa, in accordance with the usual custom and in token thereof. We award you this diploma and invest you with the hood of a Doctor of Science. Congratulations, Gerald.
So graduates, are you ready? Because now with your 2017 commencement address, please welcome Gerald Chan. Dr. Gerald Chan.
When I was asked to give this commencement speech, I accepted it heartily because I wanted to show my solidarity with UMass Boston. I had learned that a high proportion of the students of this university are either immigrants or children of immigrants. I identify with them because I too am an immigrant. It was 50 years ago this month that I came to America. Now, I came on a tourist visa. I sort of snuck into the country. Yay! And the only way that I could stay on in this country was to get admitted to a school and get a Form I-20. Many of you know what I-20 is. Now, my problem was that I had not yet finished high school. Even though I had set my sights on going to college. And I knew that without a high school diploma, there would be no way I could get into any of the major universities. Given the lack of transparency in those days, I thought it worthwhile to try finagling my way into a small college that didn't know any better. So I had heard about this small engineering college on the outskirts of Los Angeles, and so I took a Greyhound bus from San Francisco to Los Angeles and showed up at the school with my high school report cards from Hong Kong. With the exception of my grades and my class ranking in each of the subjects being numerical, the rest of the report was in Chinese. I told them that all the teachers' comments were good, and they believed me. And I was granted admission with the proviso that I had to take the SAT test during the first week of the fall term. Now, I had never taken a multiple choice test in my life. Neither did I know that people took practice tests for SATs. For an aptitude test, I thought I should go unprepared so that the test results would be a truthful reflection of my native aptitude. So I simply showed up that Saturday morning and took the test. I will now tell you something that very few people know. While my SAT math score was pretty good, my verbal score was abysmal. I will tell you what it is. It's less than 400. It couldn't have gotten me into this university. The vocabularies in the test simply stumped me, and I found most of the test nigh to incomprehensible. Today, people say that I'm a good writer. I didn't start out as such. Like many of you, English is my second language. I did not learn the English alphabet until I was in 3rd grade. I tell you my SAT score today to make the point that we never need to be ashamed of our humble beginnings. What we celebrate is the effort that we put in along the journey from the humble beginning to the destination. My parents had ingrained in me to always work as hard as I can. There is no excuse for not striving for excellence. It was in preparing for my chemistry final exam in my college freshman year that I pulled my first all-nighter in my life. In the ensuing years, there were many times when in the small hours of the morning, my tired body, in vehement protest, nevertheless, complied with my decision to keep on studying. There is simply no substitute for hard work and sacrifice. Now, there is an urban myth, and nothing more than an urban myth, that I was always a straight-A student. I was not. There were courses that I struggled to get a B or even a B-. I picked courses that I was interested in, But I would be lying to you if I told you that the degree of difficulty of getting an A with that particular professor was not a consideration in my choices. Sounds familiar, huh? Being a foreign student, shy in demeanor, scrawny in stature, inept in sports, grades were about the only thing I could be competitive in. My grades in my freshman year did enable me to transfer to UCLA the following year, and from there I was able to make my way to Harvard for my graduate work. The America I came to in 1967 felt like a land of unbounded opportunities. We believed that if we just work hard, there would be a good future for us in this country. It was an optimistic time in America, and with that optimism was a magnanimity towards the immigrants. President Kennedy had proposed an overhaul of the nation's immigration policy, which would make it easier for people to apply for immigration on the merits of their skills rather than on the basis of their ethnic origin. Those immigration reforms were signed into law in 1965 by President Johnson in a ceremony held at the base of the Statue of Liberty. In spite of the popular image of Lady Liberty being so welcoming to the huddled masses, America's welcome to immigrants has historically been contingent and by no means unwavering. When economic times were good, immigrants were welcome. When economic times were bad, immigrants were made the scapegoat. The history of Chinese immigrants in this country attests to this fickleness. In mid-19th century, Chinese laborers were brought into this country when labor was needed to build the Transcontinental Railroad. When the railroad was completed, they became surplus labor. 10 years after the beginning of the California gold rush, a quarter of the laborers working in the gold mines were Chinese. But when the mines were depleted, the Chinese became competitors for a shrinking pool of jobs. And they made matters worse for themselves by being willing to work longer hours for lower pay. In the 1880s, anti-Chinese riots spread across California to as far as Colorado and North Dakota. The Workingmen's Party of California called for the expulsion of all Chinese. The California State Constitution of 1879 had a whole section that dealt with the prohibition of Chinese from immigration and employment in the state. The anti-Chinese sentiment found its consummate expression in the passage of the Chinese Exclusion Act in the United States Congress in 1882. It was the first time in the history of this nation that a specific ethnic group was singled out for exclusion. Even the Chinese who had already settled in America then were barred from citizenship. They were to remain as permanent aliens. It would be 1943 before the act was repealed by Congress. Then as now, the Chinese immigrants wanted two things. First, they wanted to remain in this country, which offered them the opportunity to work. Second, they wanted their children to have access to education and thereby have a better future in this country. Two landmark court cases give evidence to these aspirations. In the Che Chenping versus United States case of 1889, the US Supreme Court upheld the constitutionality of the Chinese Exclusion Act, and the Chinese plaintiff was denied re-entry into the country after he went back to China to visit his family. In the Tate versus Hurley case of 1885, A Chinese family in San Francisco sued for the right of their US-born daughter to be educated in the public schools. The California Supreme Court ruled in their favor, citing equal protection under the 14th Amendment. But much like in the later Plessy versus Ferguson case for African Americans, the San Francisco School Board immediately set up separate schools for the Chinese children, alleging that they were separate but equal. These two landmark cases serve to remind us of the vulnerability of immigrants. For these early Chinese immigrants, America offered them work. What America did not offer them was social mobility. In consonance with their contemporaries that came to America from Southern and Eastern Europe, social mobility had to be a multi-generational project made possible only because their children could access public education. If immigrants in this country should seem extraordinarily concerned about their children's education, it is because they know that education is the only way that the children could have a better future. This concern is deeply rooted in the exigencies of their life circumstances. Today, the new immigrants in our midst crave with no less intensity the opportunity for their children to be educated. Governor Baker once told me that the lottery for a place in Boston's charter schools used to be done physically. Applicants would gather in a school gymnasium to observe names being drawn randomly from a vessel. Eventually, they had to do the lottery by computer because the atmosphere in the room where the lottery was physically held was emotionally insufferable. There were too many tears of joy for those who won the lottery, and there were too many tears of disappointment for those who did not. Many of those parents did not speak much English. Their tears spoke volumes of their hopes for their children. It is in this light that we must look afresh at UMass Boston. This campus is situated squarely in the midst of immigrant communities. The university has no dormitory, at least as of yet, because the students stay at home to save money. More than 50% of the student body are the first generation in their families to go to university. More than 40% are Pell Grant eligible. Among the research universities in the Boston area, UMass Boston has a unique positioning. A large study published earlier this year by the Stanford economist Raj Chetty and his colleagues suggests that if universities in this country are to move the needle for social mobility, they must both offer a quality education and widen access to students from all socioeconomic strata of society. State universities like UMass Boston are ideally suited to deliver such impact, as indeed they already have. Like most people outside the immigrant communities of Boston, I was not aware of the good work being done at UMass Boston. I'm indebted to Dr. Andy Grozovsky, with whom I share an office when we were fellow graduate students. After he became the Dean of Science and Mathematics here, he invited me to meet the students. It was only then that I realized how talented the students are, the adversities that they came from, the hardship that they endure in order to remain in school, and the accomplishments they have achieved. I met a young lady from Brazil who was graduating from this university and going on to UC Berkeley to do her PhD in physics. to qualify for a place in Berkeley's physics graduate program is an extremely high bar. Last month, I met a pre-med student from this university who was accepted to 15 medical schools. She worked as a nanny to put her younger sister through medical school back home in Ghana before coming to UMass Boston for her own pre-med studies. She supported herself through the 4 years, and she will now begin medical school this fall. Last week, I met a graduate of this university. He may well be here. Alex, are you here? Oh, Alex, he's there. Well, I met him last week. He's the first in his family to graduate from university. I asked him, why did you choose to come to UMass Boston? He said it was the only school he could afford. He is now going to UCLA for a combined MD PhD program. He also has lined up 2 part-time jobs in Los Angeles to help pay for medical school. One is to work in the emergency department of a hospital, and the other is to flip hamburgers in In-N-Out Burger. The truly extraordinary accomplishments of these students are made even more extraordinary in light of the life challenges they face. We are fortunate to have young people like these as our fellow citizens in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. They are shining examples that affirm the Commonwealth's long-standing commitment to public higher education. It was the legislature of Massachusetts that started the first university in America. Few people appreciate the fact that Harvard University started out as what we would call today a state university. It was founded by a vote of the Great and General Court of the Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1636. A tax was levied on every household for the support of that university. The Massachusetts State Constitution of 1780 states, and I quote, "It shall be the duty of legislatures and magistrates in all future periods of this Commonwealth to cherish the interests of literature and sciences and all seminaries of them, especially the University at Cambridge." The mention in the state constitution of the University in Cambridge, as yet the only university in Massachusetts, signals the importance the Commonwealth places on the higher education. For well over 200 years, Harvard University derived its financial support from the Massachusetts legislature. Its governing board was controlled by the state. Harvard was in every way a state university. It was only in 1865 that the Commonwealth spun out the university to the charge of its alumni. Massachusetts was also a pioneer in modernizing university education to adapt to the state's changing economy. As early as 1825, the state legislature considered creating and endowing an institution to provide, and I quote, "economical and sufficient instruction in the practical arts and sciences to that class of persons who do not desire or are unable to obtain a collegiate education." In other words, when Harvard was in the business of turning out gentlemen adorned with a modicum of Latin and Greek, the Commonwealth was opening the door for its citizens to be educated in the useful arts, specifically If you look back to that document in 1825, it talked about educating the students in French and Spanish so as to facilitate trade. In accounting, in economics, management of manufacturing, engineering, chemistry, and crop science. UMass Boston follows in this long tradition of public higher education in Massachusetts. In times like ours, when educational privilege has become a powerful source of economic privilege, this university is making our community more equitable and less polarized. For the founding father and the leaders in government when this nation was a young republic, democracy and education were inseparably coupled. The same 1825 report to the Massachusetts legislature has this to say, and I quote, "With us, it has become axiom that the preservation of free institutions without great intelligence in the people is impracticable. Democracy gives voice to the common man, but it is education that enables him to achieve the social and economic ends of democracy. At the same time, it is education that creates the social and economic conditions that makes democracy sustainable." Thank you. I once met an elderly professor in the University of Göttingen in Germany. I asked him, how much tuition do German universities charge? He stared at me in disbelief that I would ask such a question. He then looked me straight in the eyes and said to me, "If my grandchildren asked me to teach them something, would I ask them to pay for it?" His simple words are so loaded with meaning. I consider them as one of the most profound sentences I have ever heard. Over the years, I have ruminated over that sentence time and time again. It speaks to a conception of society and a relationship of the individual with society that is quite alien to mainstream America today. Rather than considering higher education as a commodity to be purchased and consumed by individuals for their own betterment, that German professor jolted me to think about higher education as a public good and a moral imperative. I stand before you today as a product of public higher education. My undergraduate studies were subsidized by the state of California. My graduate studies and postdoctoral training was supported by the National Institute of Health. If I had returned any benefit to society in my career, it is only because the American public first made an investment in me, beginning from the days that I was a foreign student in this country. It is in gratitude for public education, public higher education, that I come here to be with you today to show my support for UMass Boston. Now, I'm particularly pleased that the graduates gathered here have not only finished college, but you're now receiving a graduate degree. Your choosing to enroll in graduate school tells me that you want to continue to grow and that you're reaching for greater opportunities. If I had one advice for you, And this is the same advice that I give to my son and daughter-in-law for their newborn twins. It is this, one word: read. Read good books. Access a huge number of books that are freely available online. Go to bookstores and browse through what is on display. I particularly like to go to used bookstores because I'm randomly exposed to new subjects that I had not been interested in before. When it comes to books, I am very, very old-fashioned. Purchasing a book has symbolic meaning for me. It is my way of saying thank you to the author. It is my way of saying thank you to the bookstore for being a channel for the diffusion of knowledge. I am today a more avid reader than I have ever been in my younger days. Never stop reading, and you will never stop growing. Today marks a significant milestone in your lifelong education for which you and your loved ones should be very proud. I'm honored to be here to spend this day with you. I thank you for your invitation, and I send you all congratulations and best wishes. Thank you.